Isn't it a strange thing, though, how the sharpest person in the room often seems the most alone? Ever wonder if that intelligence is more of a burden than a gift?
Oh, absolutely. And what's really compelling is how quickly we can flip, one minute we admire the intellect, the next,
Hmm.
well, it sours.
Yeah, like we love the aha moments, the breakthroughs. But what about when that same sharp thinking points out something uncomfortable about us?
Exactly. It shifts things dramatically.
Okay, picture this for a second. Just imagine, what if IQ scores were like tattooed on our foreheads, visible for everyone?
Oh, okay.
Would that make you feel, I don't know, more connected
Oh.
or just totally exposed?
That's a heck of a thought experiment. It immediately shines a light on how we value intelligence, doesn't it? Would it become this liability in some circles, an asset in others?
You'd see instant hierarchies, wouldn't you?
Oh, for sure. And the pressure?
Hmm.
Intense.
I remember seeing this incredibly smart person just taken down in public once, called arrogant, just for laying out their view.
Hmm.
And my first reaction, honestly, it was relief. Relief it wasn't me.
Hmm.
Why is that? Why do we sometimes feel this secret little thrill when the genius stumbles?
Well, it taps into something deep, I think. This ambivalence we have. We say we value brilliance, but when it actually challenges our own comfortable ideas, our own sense of knowing, uh-oh, the knives come out.
We claim we're all about truth, right? We champion the people who light the way. But the second that light makes us feel a bit dim, a bit inadequate.
Then suddenly they're condescending.
Exactly. It's such a neat trick, isn't it? Turning our own insecurity into a criticism of them.
That word, condescending, it's a powerful shield. It lets you dismiss the message entirely by attacking the messenger's perceived attitude, avoids the actual point.
And today, in this always-on, hyper-connected world, being able to outthink the crowd, see things differently, it's almost like asking for trouble.
It really can feel that way.
Your insight becomes this sort of pre-existing condition for getting canceled. It's kind of chilling when you think about it.
Well, it creates this tension, doesn't it, between like fitting in and actually exploring ideas. Are we accidentally building a world where playing it safe intellectually is the only winning move, just echoing whatever's popular?
What if?
Well,
What if that dislike we feel for the know-it-all? What if it's less about them knowing too much and more about, well, what their knowing reveals about us?
you mean like our own unwillingness to put in the work, our intellectual laziness?
Yeah. Maybe their clarity just highlights our own mental fog, our reluctance to really grapple with complexity.
That makes sense. It requires effort to truly engage with complex ideas. It's frankly much easier to just slap on a label like know-it-all and move on, less mental energy required.
I know someone, brilliant mind, truly, sees right through everything, the flaws, the inconsistencies, and people resent her for it. They don't thank her for the clarity.
They prefer the illusion.
Exactly. It seems like real brilliance can be,
Yeah.
well, a very lonely path sometimes.
It's striking, isn't it, this pull towards comfortable stories, even if they're flawed, over truths that might be unsettling. The people who see clearly often end up on the outside, not because they're wrong, but because they disturbed the peace.
So let's get really honest here just for a moment. With yourself, listening, are you actually threatened by someone else's intelligence? Or is it more about the possibility that their insights might force you to question things you really rely on?
That really cuts to the core of self-awareness, doesn't it? How honestly can we look at why we feel uneasy around someone smarter? Is it
Hmm.
their knowledge, or is it stirring up our feelings about our own?
You know that old saying, ignorance is bliss? Maybe it's not about comfort. Maybe it's an admission.
Yeah.
Intellectual cowardice, almost.
Yeah.
Refusing to think harder when faced with someone who clearly understands more deeply. That bliss is just willful ignorance.
It speaks to that psychological thing, doesn't it? Cognitive dissonance. We hate holding conflicting ideas, so sticking with ignorance can feel easier, more harmonious inside, even if that harmony is built on sand.
Think about Galileo. He wasn't condemned because his science was bad. He was condemned because his truth shook the foundations of power, right?
Hmm.
Centuries later. Has it really changed that much for people who speak inconvenient truths?
It's a constant tension, isn't it, between the established way of thinking, the power structures, and ideas that genuinely challenge them. The methods change. Maybe it's not the Inquisition now, maybe it's online mobs, but that core resistance to destabilizing truth, it feels pretty timeless.
Okay, take a breath. Think about someone smart. You know who. Kind of gets under your skin. Just be brutally honest with yourself. Why? Is it really their intelligence? Or is it triggering something else? Something in you?
That requires real introspection, doesn't it? Peeling back the layers of our own reactions. Why do we react negatively sometimes? Self-awareness here is key.
We all say we value critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
Share the articles, nod along. But what happens when that critical thinking gets turned on our sacred cows? By someone sharper.
Suddenly it feels different.
Yeah, it stops feeling like intellectual debate and starts feeling personal, like an attack, doesn't it?
It highlights the gap between liking the idea of critical thinking and actually being okay when it scrutinizes us. Real critical thinking means being willing to have your own assumptions put under the microscope.
Okay, here's a choice, a stark one. Would you rather be surrounded by agreeable people who basically echo you, even if they're not bringing much insight, or be constantly challenged by brilliant minds, people who make you question everything?
Your ego knows the answer it prefers.
Right, instantly. But what about growth? What about actually evolving your thinking?
It's that classic clash, isn't it? The ego wants validation, comfort. The intellect needs challenge, rigor. Choosing comfort feels good now, but it's a recipe for stagnation down the line.
Look at any online debate. Seriously,
Yeah.
the simple emotional outburst goes viral. The nuanced, data-backed argument.
Dogpiled.
Or ignored. Exactly. What does that say about what we really value? What gets prioritized over actual considered intelligence?
It's a huge point about our information environment now. The algorithms often push the emotional stuff, right? The things that get a quick reaction. Thoughtful, complex analysis. Not so much. What does that do to us long term?
Quick fire questions then. Think fast. When smart people annoy you, is it arrogance you see? Or is it their clarity making your own thoughts feel foggy? Is it their tone? Or the uncomfortable truth they just dropped?
It forces you to look at that line between confidence and arrogance, right? And maybe consider if our own insecurity sometimes makes us perceive confidence as arrogance, especially when we feel intellectually outmatched.
Okay, confession time. This is a bit uncomfortable. I genuinely admire deep intellect, but I've also felt that tiny, shameful flicker of satisfaction when a known genius messes up publicly. That little bit of schadenfreude. What is that about? What does that contradiction say about how we relate to brilliance?
It's strangely human, isn't it? That weird sense of balance being restored when someone we see is up there stumbles. Maybe it's subconscious, trying to level the field, close that perceived gap for a second.
I knew this professor, incredibly bright, told me once, very sadly, that his mind had cost him more friends than it ever gained him. No bragging, just real sorrow about the social price.
That's heavy. It makes you ask, right, what kind of society are we building if extreme intelligence leads to isolation instead of connection? Are we really set up to value diverse thinking?
Okay, here's a thought that might sting a little. An unpopular truth, maybe. Sometimes people react badly to your intelligence, not because you're wrong, not because you're condescending, but just because you are undeniably, maybe even crushingly, right?
And their ego just can't handle it in that moment.
Precisely. It can't square that circle.
That really underscores the power of the ego, doesn't it? Accepting someone else is flat out correct can feel like a personal attack on our worldview, our sense of self.
We cheer for disruption when it comes from, like, tech billionaires selling us stuff, right? No matter how shallow. But actual intellectual disruption from someone with a genuinely original thought, ooh, that's often met with suspicion, called elitist.
Yeah, it's a very selective use of the word disruption, isn't it? It's okay if it leads to a new gadget or service. But if it challenges core beliefs or how society works, suddenly it's threatening.
Let's be real for a sec, just between us. Ever felt that pang of envy, looking at someone just effortlessly smart? They just get complex stuff.
Sure.
And how fast did that envy maybe curdle into quiet resentment, that feeling of being left behind intellectually?
It's a critical branching point, isn't it? Does that envy fuel you to learn more, or does it turn into bitterness aimed at the person who sparked the feeling?
I knew this woman, truly brilliant, could have changed fields. She's in a quiet job now, totally underutilizing her mind. Why?
Got tired of the labels.
Exactly. Tired of being called intimidating. Too much. Just for being smart. That's not just her loss. It's our collective loss. We diminished our own potential by silencing her.
It really throws gender bias into sharp relief, too, doesn't it? Qualities praised in intelligent men's confidence, directness suddenly become intimidating in women. Those labels box people in.
Okay, let's flip it. Think about times you felt really sharp, on the ball, ideas flowing. Now, what if, in that same conversation, there was someone truly exceptionally intelligent, and from their perspective, they were just patiently waiting for you to catch up?
Oof. That hits different, doesn't it?
Right. It kind of recalibrates your self-perception.
It speaks to intellectual humility, I think. realizing there are always going to be people who see deeper, understand more. It's humbling, sure, but valuable, keeps you learning, keeps you realistic.
We say we want smart leaders,
Yeah.
right? People who can handle complexity. But then look who we often choose. Charismatic figures, simple slogans, easy answers.
Comforting narratives.
Yeah. Do our actions kind of betray a fear? Are we maybe afraid of what truly intelligent leadership would actually demand of us?
It's a fundamental question about leadership, isn't it? What qualities do we really prioritize? Charisma and simplicity are appealing, for sure, but they're not the same as wisdom or deep insight needed for the big challenges.
Remember Socrates, condemned for corrupting the youth. What was he doing? Teaching them to think critically.
Hmm.
Today, maybe the hemlock is different. It's social cancellation, online shaming, but that underlying fear of challenging the status quo, it feels awfully familiar.
History really does echo, doesn't it? The methods evolve, technology, social norms shift, but that basic impulse to resist ideas that shake things up, it seems to persist.
But here's a twist. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe we don't actually hate smart people themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe what really gets to us is the mirror.
The mirror.
Yeah, the mirror they hold up, showing us our own insecurities, our own compromises, the potential we haven't lived up to. Maybe it's not them we resent, but that reflection.
That shifts the focus entirely, doesn't it? From they annoy me to their presence makes me uncomfortable about myself. Could that negative reaction be a defense mechanism, protecting us from facing our own perceived limits?
And all that disdain for intellectuals, eggheads, whatever label.
Yeah.
What if it's just a really sophisticated defense? A wall built to keep out that nagging little fear. The fear that maybe, just maybe, we're not quite as smart as we like to think we are.
It taps right into the psychology of self-perception. The ego works overtime to keep that positive self-image intact. Encountering someone who challenges that, even implicitly, that can trigger some powerful, often unconscious defenses.
So, after exploring all this, these uncomfortable corners,
Mm-hmm.
do you still feel totally justified in disliking those people? Is there still a part of you resisting this whole line of thought?
That resistance itself.
Yeah, that feeling right there. That might just be your ego fighting back,
Mm-hmm.
trying to protect itself.
It highlights how hard it is to overcome these ingrained biases, these self-protection routines, just acknowledging our own potential insecurities. That's a huge step towards seeing things more clearly.
So here it is, the mic drop moment maybe.
Yeah.
Brilliant minds aren't hated for their light. They're hated for the shadows they reveal. Our shadows. Let that sink in.
It's that fundamental interplay, isn't it? Light creates shadow. You can't have one without the other. Maybe reacting negatively to brilliance is kind of an unconscious nod to the shadows capped by our own limitations.
Okay, let's go back. That person you thought of at the start, the smart one who bugs you. After chewing on all this, are they really the problem? Or are they just the mirror showing you something you'd rather not see?
It forces a question of personal responsibility, doesn't it? Is it easier to blame them, to project outwards, than to look inwards and figure out where that discomfort is really coming from? Owning our part is, well, it's essential for growth.
Look, if this whole deep dive made you feel a bit itchy, uncomfortable, good. That was the point. Now maybe share it. Send it to the smartest person you know, especially if they seem like they sometimes dim their own bulb to make others feel okay.
Yeah, because it's so important to create spaces where intellectual sparks are fanned, not smothered. People with exceptional insights, they should be encouraged, celebrated, not subtly punished for seeing clearly.
And that quick judgment, calling someone arrogant just because their mind works fast. What if that's just projection? What if their confidence is just the self-assurance you kind of wish you had in your own thinking?
It's fascinating how our own unmet needs or insecurities can totally warp how we see others. We project onto them, and it leads to judgments that might be completely unfair.
Think about this. Which silence echoes louder in the end? The silence of a brilliant person forced to keep quiet to fit in? Or the silence of comfortable, unchallenged mediocrity, which kind of quiet feels more suffocating?
It forces us to weigh comfort against growth, doesn't it? Fitting in feels safe, maybe, but it can come at the cost of intellectual aliveness, of making a real contribution.
You know, we treat uncomfortable truths from smart people like those annoying software updates, don't we?
Yeah, remind me later.
Exactly, just want to scroll past. But hitting ignore on real insight again and again, that leads somewhere. It leads to a slow, collective dumbing down.
It really highlights the danger of always choosing easy engagement over harder thinking, doesn't it? Our media habits, how we consume information, it has real consequences for our shared understanding.
Imagine having, like, intellectual X-ray vision, seeing the cracks everyone else ignores. Now imagine trying to explain those cracks to people who are perfectly happy just looking at the surface.
That must be incredibly frustrating.
Right. That's the reality for some of the sharpest minds, isolated by their own clarity.
And it shows how hard it is to communicate really deep insights, especially to people who don't have the same background or maybe willingness to engage. The deeper the insight, the easier it is to misunderstand or dismiss.
Quick self-check again. Remember a time you called someone condescending? Okay, honestly now, were they actually wrong? Or were they just operating at a speed or depth that made you feel off balance in that moment?
It makes you question how we even judge intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Do we look for accuracy and depth, or do we get swayed by presentation, by tone? Especially when our own ego feels a bit bruised.
And you, listening, ever done it? Subtly play down your smarts. In a meeting, on a date, just to make someone else feel more comfortable.
Mm.
What a quiet little tragedy that is, each time. Dimming your own spark just to fit in a smaller box.
It really speaks to those invisible social pressures, doesn't it? How the fear of friction, of judgment, can just stifle people from being fully themselves intellectually.
A brilliant scientist told me once, after publishing something huge, he wasn't bracing for scientific critiques. He was bracing for attacks on his tone.
Wow.
Think about that. Killing the message by complaining about the delivery. It's subtle assassination of intellect via etiquette complaints.
It's such a common deflection tactic, isn't it? Focus on some minor perceived flaw in how something was said, so you don't have to actually grapple with the idea itself, especially if it's challenging.
So what's the real cost to all of us? When the brightest feel they have to apologize for being clear, water down their insights, what happens to progress? To truth? When intellectual honesty gets subtly punished?
It's a huge question about our future, really. A society that discourages rigorous thinking, even implicitly, it risks becoming stagnant, less able to solve the big problems we face.
You probably think of yourself as open-minded. We all like to think that. But for many, the mind isn't really an open garden. It's more like a fortress, especially when ideas come along that make us feel inadequate.
It's that confirmation bias again, isn't it? And just the sheer discomfort of having our core beliefs challenged. Real open-mindedness takes conscious effort, constantly pushing back against those natural tendencies.
Here's a tough one. You don't actually have to hate intelligence to help suppress it. You just have to consistently choose the easy answer over the complex one. Choose comfort over clarity. Choose the familiar over the insightful, even if the insight is unsettling.
And most of us make that subtle choice pretty often,
Yeah.
daily probably.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like passive complicity. Our inaction, our preference for the simple narrative, it shapes the whole environment, making it less welcoming for demanding ideas.
And who gets to decide anyway? What's too smart? Where's that line between insight and arrogance? Is there a rule book? Or is that line drawn purely by the listener's ego the second it feels a tiny bit threatened?
It's so subjective, isn't it? One person's arrogance is another's confident clarity. Our own stuff massively colors how we perceive it.
For years, I thought when people reacted badly to me being quick, it meant I was showing off. Then it hit me. Often, my speed just revealed their hesitation. They're not being ready. They didn't hate my answer. They hated being subtly shown up.
That makes so much sense from an interpersonal view. Discomfort arises when those gaps in knowledge or processing speed become obvious. It's psychologically easier to blame the other person's showiness than to sit with our own feeling of inadequacy.
A sharp mentor told me once, being right is often the easy part. The real trick is getting people to accept you're right, and maybe even appreciate it, especially if your being right makes them feel wrong.
It highlights that social layer of sharing knowledge, doesn't it? Pure logic, solid facts, often not enough, especially if those facts challenge beliefs tied up with identity or status.
There's a truth about your own intellectual insecurity, maybe buried so deep you mistake its muffled sounds for righteous anger at arrogant people. But it's not them. This is about you.
It really calls for that honest self-examination, doesn't it? Exploring those potentially unconscious drivers behind our reactions, it can unlock why we respond the way we do, sometimes irrationally, to smarter people.
Painfully familiar, maybe.
Yeah.
Ever deliberately dumbed down.
Mm-hmm.
Socially, work, dating, just to make someone else feel less small. What did that cost you, even subtly? That little act of dimming your own light.
It really speaks to that pervasive pressure to conform, doesn't it? How we might subtly suppress our own abilities to avoid rocking the boat or making someone else uncomfortable.
Let's just bust this myth right now.
Yeah.
There's no objective measure of too smart socially. There's only this person is processing faster, seeing connections I'm missing, and that gap makes me feel inadequate. It's not about them, it's about your reaction to the gap.
It really frames intelligence as relational, doesn't it? Our perception of someone else's smarts is always filtered through our own self-assessment, our own comfort level with difference.
What if those smartest people, the isolated ones, what if they're not trying to be difficult? What if they just genuinely can't sign up for the comforting illusions everyone else seems okay with? They just can't pretend the emperor has clothes when he's clearly naked.
It raises that fundamental question about the role of the intellectual, doesn't it? Is it just to echo the status quo, or is it to challenge it, honestly, even if it's uncomfortable?
So here's the big identity question. A life of comfortable, maybe even popular, mediocrity, or a life chasing challenging, maybe sometimes resented, but ultimately respected brilliance. Which silence haunts you more on your deathbed?
Taking that long view really forces you to confront your core values, doesn't it? What kind of mark do you want to leave? What are you willing to endure for it?
And let's not forget the shame, that quiet shame of resenting the truth teller, especially when you're kind of benefiting from the lie they're exposing. Maybe your outrage at their tone is just masking your own complicity.
That cognitive dissonance again. We rationalize sticking with things we know are flawed. And sometimes lashing out at the person pointing out the flaw is easier than facing our own internal contradiction.
Real gut check moments, especially for parents. If your kid turned out to be a genius, truly exceptional, would you push them to be fully, brilliantly themselves, knowing the social risks? Or would you subtly teach them to tone it down, to fit in? It's heartbreaking just to think about.
It's a huge question about nurturing talent, isn't it? Do we prioritize social ease over letting someone reach their full intellectual potential? What are the long-term costs of choosing conformity?
And your silence. When you see idiocy getting applause, mediocrity being celebrated, that silence isn't neutral, it's a vote. A quiet vote for a dumber, less insightful world. You cast it every time you stay quiet.
It powerfully underscores how individual choices add up. Failing to challenge nonsense, failing to champion real insight, contributes to this overall decline in critical thinking, our ability to tackle big problems.
Fast forward. Future generations dealing with the mess we leave behind, and what's our excuse going to be? For ignoring the obvious solutions, the clear warnings. Oh, well, the people with the answers, they just made us feel a bit awkward.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it, how history might judge us, our apparent preference for easy narratives over hard truths.
Maybe. Maybe true intelligence isn't about having all the answers. Maybe it's about having the courage to live with the hardest questions and to keep asking them out loud, even when it costs you.
That really speaks to the heart of intellectual inquiry, doesn't it? It's often more about wrestling with uncertainty, asking the tough, uncomfortable questions, than finding neat, tidy answers.
Okay, confession time again. I have countless times softened my point, downplayed an insight, pretended not to get something just to make people comfortable, to not seem too much, and every single time I felt a tiny bit of my own fire just dim. That's the quiet tragedy here, I think.
It really highlights the personal cost of these societal pressures, doesn't it? Constantly suppressing your own thoughts, your curiosity. It leads to this feeling of being unfulfilled, of not contributing what you could.
Look, we're all in this together, right?
Right.
We've all chosen comfortable ignorance sometimes over the harsh light of brilliance. It's human. But just admitting that, acknowledging that shared failing, that's the first, maybe painful step towards choosing differently, towards being more intellectually honest.
It emphasizes our shared responsibility, doesn't it? To build a culture that genuinely values curiosity, tough thinking, the pursuit of understanding. Recognizing our own part in hindering that is where change starts.
So why? Why do the sharpest minds often get pushback? After all this, the answer seems brutally simple. Because they force us, just by being who they are, to face truths we'd really rather ignore. Uncomfortable truths. Inconvenient truths.
It boils down to that fundamental tension, doesn't it? Between the drive for truth and the deep human need for comfort, for validation, for things to stay the same. Raw intelligence often disrupts that comfortable status quo, inevitably.
Intelligence isn't the enemy. It never was. The real enemy, it's our fear, our collective, often unspoken fear of what that intelligence might reveal about us, about our world, about our cherished beliefs. That's the obstacle. And it's way past time we started facing it with courage, with honesty.
It's like this constant internal battle, isn't it? Wanting to know more, but also fearing what that knowledge might mean, how it might change things. Recognizing that conflict within ourselves is maybe the key to becoming more intellectually brave.
If this deep dive stirred something, made you uneasy, poked a nerve, I really urge you to listen again. Because often, the ideas we resist the most, they're the ones we need the most for real growth.
It powerfully reinforces that idea, doesn't it? That real learning often means wrestling with difficult, uncomfortable concepts. That initial resistance, it might actually be a sign you're onto something important.
If this resonated, please share it. Share it with the brilliant people you know who might feel they have to hide their light. And maybe share with people who might, unknowingly, be part of the reason they feel that way. Let's spark some conversations, maybe slightly uncomfortable ones.
Absolutely, because open dialogue about these dynamics, intelligence, social pressure, insecurity, that's how we move towards a more constructive understanding. Honest conversation is vital for change.
This has been the deep dive. We're not here for easy answers. We're here to question the comfortable beliefs. Until next time.
The pursuit of deeper understanding takes courage, a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about the world and ourselves. We hope this gave you something valuable to think about.